What is going on, IF Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're gonna have to do it again. We're gonna have to rebuttal another fitness YouTuber who talks about intermittent fasting not working, but uses a very flawed study. I'm gonna break it down in this video. Stay tuned. Okay guys, just like this video, this video, this video, and this video, and even this video right here, I've tackled this problem, this intermittent fasting rebuttal problem, where every single time, and I mentioned this in the modified alternate day fasting studies, is that every single time the intermittent fasting is put up against caloric restriction and someone makes a video or someone makes an article or what have you, an Instagram post, and they say, look, see, intermittent fasting does not work. It does not work versus calorie restriction. It is extremely, extremely misleading. And the reason that it is misleading is because every single one of those videos that I mentioned, where I talked about it, those articles, and even all of these YouTube videos and Instagram posts that are made, they use the title of intermittent fasting. However, the participants are never actually fasting. What the participants are doing are eating at a very severe caloric restriction, but not severe enough to activate the hormonal benefits that you get from fasting. Now, I already don't really like the 5-2 diet. Now, I made this video a long time ago critiquing the 5-2 diet method, only because you're not fasting for 5 days and you're supposedly fasting for 2 days. But in those 2 days that you're fasting, it's not even enough if you were to fully fast those 2 days to actually get the compounding effects of fat adaptation, the insulin sensitivity to increase that, which is why intermittent fasting, when you do a full fast, 0% caloric intake during your fasted period, is when you're activating those things. You have to understand that the post-absorptive range, as explained by Dr. Stephen Anton, that metabolic switch over happens after 8 to 12 hours of not eating. If you're allowed to eat 600 calories on your fasting day, and you can eat it however you like, it doesn't have to be one meal. You could spread it throughout the day. You could have some sort of a meal replacement drink and drink that throughout the day, or drink 2 of those. You can potentially stump that 8 to 12 hours. And then the thing is, you have to get to that 8 to 12 hours. And then when you get there, at that point, that's when all of the benefits commence. That's when the body fat, focusing on the body fat burning starts. And then if you're not giving yourself much time after that range, then how are you being effective with the intermittent fasting protocol? So someone who can eat 600 calories or 400 calories during their fasting period, they are not fasting. So all of the studies that refute fasting or say that fasting doesn't work versus caloric restriction is the same. In reality, they're just comparing regular calorie restriction, 75% of your daily intake, versus severe caloric restriction. That's all it is. Someone can eat 1,300 calories, the other person can only eat 600 calories. Severe caloric restriction will work against you. It won't work for you because you're not letting your body activate any of the hormonal elements that come with actually fasting, but then you're also just eating the same amount as the other person when compared throughout the week. So you're really not doing anything. You're stumping your fasting benefits by consuming 600 calories. So what's the alternative? It's very, very simple. For these researchers or these YouTubers or these people who post on Instagram to actually look at studies that present 0 caloric intake during the fasting periods. Not to mention that there are a lot of researchers out there that understand that post-absorptive range, that understand that metabolic switch. But if a researcher or a scientist want a specific result versus intermittent fasting, it's very easy to do it. If you take the 5-2 diet, they're barely fasting, so they're not getting the benefits there. And then they're only fasting with a caloric intake of 600 to 400 calories. So you're stumping that post-absorptive range. If you are aware of that, then you know that before the study even completes itself, that there isn't going to be a difference between caloric restriction because they're basically doing the same thing. And the video with Tiger Fitness, he's utilizing a study that's doing just that. Yes, it's 1 year. Yes, it's intermittent fasting only because they throw that into the pool of intermittent fasting. Only because 5-2 is considered intermittent fasting, and eating is still considered intermittent fasting, which to me just it drives me nuts, only because it's very misleading. If you see a title that says that, you're gonna believe that intermittent fasting, the way that you think of intermittent fasting, the 16-8, the 1 meal a day, you're gonna think that those protocols don't work. And in reality, those are not the protocols that are being put up against calorie restriction. It's protocols like modified alternate day fasting, where you eat and you don't eat, eat and you don't eat, but the days that you don't eat, you get to eat up to 600 calories. Go figure, sometimes up to 1,000 calories. And then you have the 5-2 diet, where you can eat up to 400 to 600 calories. You're not fasting, so you're not gonna get the benefits of fasting. But unfortunately, modified alternate day fasting and the 5-2 diet with consumption on your fasting days, with calorie consumption, are considered intermittent fasting protocols. So they can abuse that concept as much as they want. They can say, hey, look, this is intermittent fasting, and we prove that intermittent fasting versus calorie restriction is not superior. Understand one thing, calories will always matter. If you're fasting, if you're not fasting, it doesn't matter. That study has never been debunked. That research has never been debunked. Calories in versus calories out has been the #1 determining factor of weight loss. That is understood. What intermittent fasting does is it helps focus the weight loss on the body fat as opposed to all the other parts in your body, like muscle, for example. It helps protect muscle and helps focus on body fat. Now, it is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when someone puts out a video and doesn't let you click on a link to the study in their description, for example. Or on Instagram, they don't send you the link to the study or tell you where you can find the study. They just put up a nice little post with a few bullet points, and then you think intermittent fasting doesn't work. But in this case, you didn't really even have to do that, because he reads the abstract for you, and he even tells you in the abstract,
intermittent energy restriction group was advised to consume 400 and 600 calories, male, female,
that they were able to consume 400 to 600 calories. Below, I will have links to 3 studies that you can look at. They're randomized, they're controlled, and they're crossover. That study, the 1-year study, was randomized, was controlled, but it was not crossover. And crossover is really important because you want to see, does this replicate if I take this group that didn't do it and this group that did do it? If I flip them, if I wash out the period of what they did, flip them over, do I get the same results? And that gives you more of an idea of accuracy depending on the study design. So the studies that I'm linking are randomized, are controlled, and are crossover through the period of about 8 weeks. Yes, it's a shorter time frame. However, adherence is elevated when the time frames are shorter. Also, in these studies, the meals were given to them to eat. In that 1-year 5-2 diet, they were gone for 6 months and then came back and then evaluated by the researchers. So for the entire phase where they were just at maintenance, the researchers didn't know what they were doing. They could have been adhering to it or not adhering to it. It was up in the air. They didn't know. The only reason it's considered a controlled trial is because you have one group that's doing it and one group that's not doing it. So that's the control. The group that's not doing it can give us an idea if this is beneficial or not versus something that's normally done every day. For 6 months, they were doing a calorie restriction program where they met periodically with the researchers, and then for 6 months after that, they were just doing maintenance and they didn't meet with them until after the 6 months. And then that's when they took the results and then presented it in the research. Yes, it was a 1-year trial, and you can consider that a very long trial for intermittent fasting, but it's extremely flawed in the protocol chosen and the study design. The 3 studies that I'm putting below are 1 meal a day study with 0 caloric intake, a 16-8 fasting study that is trained males that are doing resistance training with 0 caloric intake. And in that study, as well as the 1 meal a day study, fat loss is significant and is actually higher in that group. Even when the 1 meal a day study were doing maintenance, they still lost some weight and even body fat versus the 3 meal a day group. And this was controlled, randomized crossover with the meals themselves being provided by the researchers to ensure that they were consuming the exact calorie intake that was requested by the researchers. And just for the women out there, I have the women's study that was just released in December using the circadian rhythm called time restricted feeding, where it was a 16-8 protocol as well, but they ate earlier in the day, and it shows benefits when they did a restriction diet versus the calorie restriction. Even though the restriction was the same, the health markers, the metabolic health markers, and the body fat loss was increased in the women who did the time restricted feeding method. And this was randomized controlled crossover. So yes, it feels redundant that I have to make these kinds of videos. I didn't think that I did have to make this video again and again and again, but YouTubers and a lot of Instagram people, a lot of people on Facebook, whatever it is, when they have a specific mindset on what they think should be done during training or fitness, and they've had that for a long time, and then emerging research kind of shifts that a little bit, it's harder for them to grasp onto that. Personal trainers are very notorious for being against intermittent fasting because they went to school, they studied the traditional diet method that is very dated. And when there's emerging research and they're like, hey, well, I've helped people lose weight without intermittent fasting, so why is this thing showing up out of nowhere now? It's somewhat threatening and confusing at the same time because this is a protocol that they haven't experienced or haven't learned. So this is something that they have to actually research fully 100% on their own. If you want to look at a doctor that is really tackling this head on and studying this in the field and creating studies himself, over 70 studies were done with intermittent fasting, look at Dr. Stephen Anton's work. He has a lot of studies done with intermittent fasting. He even has 16 clinical trials that shows that intermittent fasting is effective for fat loss versus just calorie restriction. Yes, I understand that it's hard to comprehend all of this. It's new science, it's new data. But the studies, even dating back to early 2000s, 2001, when zero caloric intake is inputted in the design, you then see the benefits of intermittent fasting flourish. If someone else posts another video stating that intermittent fasting doesn't work, simply check to see if it's a zero caloric intake or if the participants are just doing severe caloric restriction versus caloric restriction. That's the determining factor. Are they actually fasting or are they eating 1,000 calories, 600 calories? Because that will not allow you to get into the post-absorptive range, and thus you won't switch over. You won't do the metabolic switch over. So I appreciate all the Discord, even if it's anti-intermittent fasting or pro-intermittent fasting. So I appreciate the video that was placed by Tiger Fitness talking on his position with intermittent fasting. But I do want to clear the air when it comes to intermittent fasting. I want you to understand those studies that are being presented. Yes, they're 1 year. Yes, the bold words are very, very powerful. Intermittent fasting versus calorie restriction does not provide superior weight loss, does not provide superior health benefits. Thus, intermittent fasting doesn't work. But when you look into the details, they're not truly doing intermittent fasting. They're doing the worst, in my opinion, protocol, in which I believe shouldn't even be put in the pool of intermittent fasting, considering that you get to eat and you only do it 2 times in the entire week, while the rest of the days you're actually eating at a normal clip. So I hope this helps. Please check out the links in the description. I also linked the study that was placed by Tiger Fitness in the description if you want to take a look at that. Please understand though, that one would require purchasing. The 3 that I put, 1 meal a day, 16-8, train athletes, and women study 16-8. You can see the full study, no purchase necessary. And I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon, and I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. course, as always, guys, I'll see you on Sunday for another FAQ. Peace.